The FDA has issued a warning about the risks of prenatal screening tests. What are the risks of trying to have a perfect baby? That's one of the conversations we're going to have today. In addition, we'll talk about, there's a lot of talk about the worldview of children these days, why they are not thinking biblically even within the church. Well, a recent study from our colleague George Barna in the Center for Biblical Worldview may have some clues as to why. It turns out only 2% of parents, according to his research, of preteens have a biblical worldview themselves. We may be discovering something. But first, our top news item of the day. The Department of Justice announced late yesterday that per the CDC's request, it will appeal the federal judge's ruling that struck down the mask mandate for public transportation. Because the masking requirement for travelers has been set to expire May 3rd, it is believed the primary reason for this appeal is to avoid any legal precedent and preserve the CDC's authority for future mandates. And while the White House claims polling shows public opinion is split on the issue, the speed with which airlines and most airline authorities dropped any masking requirements indicates that most travelers are ready to move on. Now, joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Randy Weber from Texas. He's a member of the House Transportation Committee and the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. Congressman Weber, welcome to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Joseph. We are in my truck driving. It might be a little bit noisy, but we're grateful to be here.
Well, we are grateful to have you and grateful for you taking some time from the road. And perhaps the road is the best place to have this conversation about transportation and mask mandates. The Biden administration, after early indications that they would not appeal the decision, has now decided that they will. Are you surprised by this development?
And what I'm surprised by is they didn't ask the teachers union what they thought the CDC ought to recommend. Turns out that apparently the teachers union was driving so much of what the CDC said. But no, I'm not surprised. They're all about less freedom and more government control. That doesn't shock me at all. And I know you saw Biden today when he was asked by a reporter about the mask, he turned to Title 42. So he doesn't have a clue what's going on with the mask mandate, in my opinion, Joseph.
Well, there's no doubt that the story, the narrative coming out of the White House has changed, and it's changed on Title 42, and we'll get to that. And it has changed even in the last 72 hours on this mask mandate since the Florida judge made her decision. And one of the concerns and one of the topics is what is driving the White House's decision to appeal this. Now, yesterday, Jen Psaki had this to say about why it would possibly be important to appeal. Let's go ahead and play clip 2. Then I want to give you a chance to respond.
And the Department of Justice, as you noted, has indicated that they would appeal, not just because they think it's entirely reasonable, of course, to have this additional time to look at it, but because they think that for current and future public health crises, we want to preserve that authority for the CDC to have in the future.
Congressman Weber, what's your reaction to that?
How scary is that? They want to preserve the authority to ride herd over Americans' free will. How scary is that? And let me add this too, Joseph. They want to get back to the CDC. The scientists is who the president cited earlier, I think today. They want to get back to the scientists. And of course, we all know what a joke that was coming from CDC. And it's funny that they refer to the science on the mask mandates. But when you start talking about transgender and that agenda that they're pushing, and a doctor who is a scientist by trade, doctor with all those years of medical training, looks at a baby and says, that's a boy or that's a girl. What about that science? They forget about that science. Now they want to tout science and they want to shove masks, almost up the American people's nose, but at least cover part of their face. It's so hypocritical, it's scary.
Well, you make a good point. A lot of us feel like the line between science and opinion is being blurred. And on issues like this, it's easy to see why. If it's not possible, if you're not a biologist, to tell the difference between men and women, the questions about the effectiveness of masks become all the more complex when even the simple is very complex. Now, Congressman Weber, states in some cases are insisting that they are going to maintain these mandates. And I want to play clip one. Here's Governor Hochul from New York explaining why, despite whatever the federal government is doing, they want to keep their mandates.
Let's just be smart about it. I think people do feel better when they're in public transit, sitting really close to somebody, to know that people are protecting themselves. And again, this is very much in the short term.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, on one hand, you want to talk about federalism. States have the right to make their own laws, but now you get into interstate commerce clause of the Constitution. People in Texas get this, they don't want it to do with masks. The vast majority of them, especially in my district, they're freedom-loving people. They make their own decisions. They believe in science, God-given science. You mentioned a biblical worldview earlier. That's exactly what we believe in. The problem becomes, Joseph, that if you're going to fly from Texas to another state, Washington, D.C., now you're crossing interstate, lines. So it's interstate or state lines. So it's interstate commerce. I think that people ought to vote with their feet, move out of those states where those governors have that kind of idea. As Jen Psaki said, they want to preserve authority, basically, to be able to do whatever they want with Americans.
That's right. And according to a Morning Consult political poll, it found that 2/3 of Americans supported the extension of the mandate. And this poll was taken before the Florida judge's decision. But anecdotally, looking around America's airports now, it looks like the supermajority of Americans were happy to take their masks off. Where do you think the public is on this issue?
Well, I think it depends on how they phrase. This, Justin. It depends on how they phrase the question and who they polled. And you can get any answer you want. Did they poll the flying public who fly frequently? Did they poll the people who believe that the state is the end all, be all, cure all, and the state is their God? Who did they poll to get that answer? I guarantee you in Texas, especially in District 14, boy, that number is way underwater for us.
Well, I want to change the subject on you for a moment, if I can, to Ukraine. Today, the White House announcing an additional $800 million in military resources, another $500 in direct economic assistance to the Ukrainian government. Is this the right move?
Is it the right move? I'd have to look at some of what they're requiring. Do they need to come back to Congress? We would love for the president to get Congress's approval on any spending. Obviously, this president is derelict in his duties. He's derelict in a whole bunch of different ways too, but I won't go there. He should have been working on stuff when the Russians started amassing at the border. He should have been paying attention and getting assets moved. He should have not shut down the Keystone Pipeline. He should not have made an energy crisis over here. And of course, then what did he do? He turns and blames it on Putin after he has shut down our Keystone Pipeline, which comes into my district, 840,000 barrels of oil a day. Remember, the Colonial Pipeline system last year got shut down by computer hacks. It fed the entire southeastern part of the United States about 3 million barrels of product a day. The Keystone Pipeline carries over 1/4 of the same capacity. He shuts that down. He opens up Russia's Nord Stream 2. Then he begs the Saudis to increase production. This guy has done such a number on us, and now he wants to blame inflation and all this on Putin. He knew Putin was set to invade Ukraine. He waited way too long to act. He's doing ostensibly the same thing on the island just south of China, our good friends in Taiwan. And so this guy just, as a commander in chief, he gets an F minus in my book.
Well, Congressman, I know that there are a lot of Americans who feel the same way. And in fact, public opinion generally shows that he's underwater on a range of issues that might be influencing how he's handling the mask situation and the equivocation that he's happening. And now the last question the last issue I'd like to get in with you is at the border. And this is President Biden talking about Title 42 and the border policy. That's clip 5. Let's go ahead and play that.
No, what I'm considering is continuing to hear from first of all, there's going to be an appeal by the Justice Department. Because as a matter of principle, we want to be able to be in a position where if in fact it is strongly concluded by the scientists that we need Title 42, that we be able to do that. But there has been no decision on extending Title 42.
Congressman Weber, can you interpret that for the American people?
I tell you what, yeah, it's called, you hear the term PC, politically correct. For him, it's pure confusion. That's his PC mindset, pure confusion. The stuff going on at the border, you know this, Title 42 was from World War II. We ought to be able to turn people away that come from a country where there's infectious disease, and that's a pandemic that we're experiencing. As you know, our great President Trump did that. He used that. They ought to be extending it. If you read back on Title 42, the law, Joseph, you'll find out that it actually gives the Surgeon General the power to make those decisions with, advising the president, if you will. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't think they ever envisioned that we'd have such an inept president when that law was put into effect in 1944, I think. And so this guy's totally out of touch now. I have filed a bill, Joseph, that says if the 4 countries south of us, El Salvador, Guatemala, Nicaragua, and Mexico, don't start stemming the tide of people coming north, we shut off all of their foreign aid. That was filed, I don't know, my notes are on my phone I'm talking from, I think 10 days ago, give or take, has right now originally nine original co-sponsors. So we're starting to push that among our colleagues, say, look, and Greg Abbott had the right idea. Shut down the truck traffic from Mexico, make them pay at the border, and those Mexican governors, those states will pay attention. And now what I'm suggesting we do is we shut down all foreign aid to those 4 countries south of us until they stem that tide.
Well, we look forward to following up on that and seeing if the White House is receptive to that, and certainly the rest of Congress as well. It is interesting that while the White House seems to insist that COVID is not over, therefore we still need federal mask mandates, they may be suggesting that COVID is over at the border because Title 42 exists to prohibit viruses from coming across the border, and they seem to not think that's necessary anymore. But we will continue to follow this story. Congressman Weber, we appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph. Appreciate what y'all are doing.